Usually, whenever I try to start something, I go strong for about 2 days and then I kind of forget about it. Hi, my name's Renya, and you're listening to WC Wellness. One thing I've struggled with a lot in my younger years was building habits. In high school, it wouldn't be an understatement to say that I was pretty lethargic. It's kind of funny because I was actually enrolled in sports, but I was still really lazy. Especially when the pandemic hit, any form of structure or schedule I had was absolutely thrown out. I remember being in my junior year of high school when the original lockdown happened, and I was watching Netflix until like 6 in the morning, and then I went to bed and I was asleep until about like 3 in the afternoon. Without any structure to help me, I basically fell apart and it was not good. I don't think it was until I ended my freshman year of university that I was able to get myself back into a structured kind of lifestyle. A lot of my bad habits from high school kind of followed me into my freshman year of university, and it took a while for me to be able to turn them around into something positive. I realized, for me at least personally, a lot of bad habits stem from free time. Even my freshman year of university, when I had a lot of free time, I feel like I wasted it on my phone or just, lounging around. When I had hours and hours a day with nothing to fulfill me or with time to waste, I didn't utilize all of that free time to push myself. I think that's a common thing, and it isn't entirely bad because I think all teens spend a lot of time just lounging around or on their phone, and that's normal teenage behavior. But now, as an adult, I realize how valuable free time really is as my schedule gets more and more booked up. I feel like there's 2 kinds of habit building or lifestyle changes you can make, and it's all time dependent. When you're younger and you have 24 hours in a day with no expectations, bills to pay, classes to attend, or homekeeping to get done, it's so much easier to make change. When you're older and you have something that occupies you full time, whether it's school or work or both, the amount of time you have to add in new habits is diminished. I mean, we all want to have some free time at the end of the day, enough time for sleep, etc. When you have less and less time, adding habits gets harder and harder. I really wish that we could add more hours to the day, but we can't, and something I've been told all the time when I was a kid was to make time for it. If we really care about something and want something to happen, we can make time for it. I feel like that sentiment was a lot easier or more applicable when I was younger and a teenager because I always had so much free time. I think I would have to go to school by 8 a.m. and then I'd be done with all of my sports and activities by 5 p.m. Just back then, it was so much easier to make time for things, and now as an adult, you really have to struggle and prioritize and make things happen. It's a lot of responsibility and it's a lot of work to make your own active lifestyle choices and changes, especially when we're overexhausted adults with so many different responsibilities and not a lot of time. When I was growing up, I was told it takes 21 days to form a habit and to make those connections that release dopamine when you do an activity. I was actually doing some research into it, and a lot of different studies say it could take from 14 days to 365 days to form a habit. I feel like a lot of those studies were also focusing on neurotypical brains, and when you add things like ADD or ADHD into the mix, it complicates habit building so much more. For me, it's dependent on how much I care about the activity and how much I care about the benefit for it to form a habit, but it usually takes me about 2 weeks or a month for a habit to form. I remember when I started going to the gym, it was a big struggle at the beginning to actually get up and go, especially when it was so early in the morning. Whenever I begin a new habit, it takes a lot of mental effort in the beginning, and then at the end of it, it's more of muscle memory and my body craving that new habit. But I also feel like everyone's different, and you can't take a bunch of case studies and say, well, this is what science says, you should do this. It's all about yourself and knowing yourself and what motivates you. Growing up, my parents would use the reward system for me to get my homework done or something, and while it worked, I don't think that would work now. I feel like people, and me especially, people who don't have enough discipline can just kind of say, well, why can't I get a cookie? Why can't I get candy now, even though I didn't finish my work? There's just so much responsibility you have to put on yourself in order to form a new habit because you have to be on yourself to do the new thing. You have to continue doing it and you have to want to do it. Growing up is just so weird because you realize that you have full bodily autonomy and you can do or not do whatever you want. But that also means simultaneously that you have to force yourself to do the things that need to get done, and you can decide to do the things that are optional. It's just different because instead of being punished in a school setting or like a parental setting, the only punishment is your life and where it's gonna go. So with all the impending doom and societal pressure, it's just really hard to form a habit. I also feel like habit building is just strictly mindset. I mean, for most of us, the only person making you do something is yourself or your own thought processes that make you think that you have to do it. So a lot of the times when I'm forming a new habit, I kind of gaslight myself into like wanting to do it or needing to do it. It's kind of like with the idea of going into work, you know? Like no one wants to work, no one wants to clock into their minimum wage restaurant industry job where they deal with screaming customers and kids the whole time. But somewhere in your brain, you know that you have to go to work in order to make money or in order to feel self-fulfilled, this, that. So like before my shift at work, I'd just hype myself up, I'd listen to music, I'd give myself like a half-hour leeway of just walking time, clocking in, sometimes I clock in early kind of thing. I just give myself me time to make it more enjoyable. I mean, if I'm spending like 30 hours a week at one place with like the same like 7 people, you want to enjoy it. Now, I'm not saying you have to gaslight yourself into saying, oh, I love capitalism, I love work, but you have to find aspects of something that you don't want to do enjoyable and pleasurable. I mean, it's the same thing with even driving into school. Like, I don't want to go into school, I'm miserable, but I have to find something in my day that will be enjoyable that I look forward to because it makes everything in the long run so much easier. When I started going to the gym regularly, I kind of had to like goad myself into doing it. The beginning was great. I had a good like 3 days where I'm like, I'm gonna go to the gym, I'm gonna get up early, I'm gonna be so fit, I'm gonna look so good, all of this nonsense, and then it faded by like day 4. By day 4, I was definitely dragging my feet to get out of bed, and I was like, I do not want to go to the gym, this is so stupid, I just want to sleep. To form that habit, I definitely tried to find things enjoyable about going to the gym, like maybe getting food after, the meal I was gonna cook after, just how my body felt after a workout, all of this stuff. Now this habit is still on and off, and there's still a lot of days where I wake up and I'm like, I do not want to go to the gym, and I force myself to go anyway. But it was kind of a mix of both mental and physical change that forced me to keep this habit. And there's a lot of habits like that my body physically changes while I'm actively working on it, so then it's so much easier to do on autopilot. For example, like eating every 3 hours, that was something new I started doing I think my sophomore year, and like at the beginning it was hard, it was kind of like, oh my god, I don't have time for this is stupid, why do I have to like focus so much on it? And now it's second nature, and when I'm hungry and I'm gonna eat. The habits that I feel are so much harder to implement are mindset changes. The best advice I can give to building a physical habit is to keep at it. I mean, obviously there's a lot of mindset that goes into it. You have to have a positive connection with this new habit you're building. You have to think of it positively, and you have to want to do it. I mean, after a long time, after you start doing a new physical habit, which might be going for a walk in the morning, just waking up at 6 in the morning, whatever you want to do, your body's compass will eventually start steering you to do it without second thought. This kind of habit is a time thing where you have to wait it out and wait for your body to adjust and wait for your body to want it. Behavioral changes or mindset changes are a lot more difficult. I mean, in order to create a behavioral change, you have to understand where that behavior stems from in the first place. Like, for example, when I was in high school, I was really, really negative and I didn't even realize it, and that was just because of my influences growing up. I always had very sassy, snarky, sarcastic influences growing up, and that kind of became my personality. It's so much harder to be less sarcastic if you don't A, know what sarcasm is, or B, why you're sarcastic. For me personally, I was just following my role models, but for other people, it might be a little different. It took a lot of reflection, and it took, I want to say, about like 3 years for me to stop making small comments that a lot of people would find to be actually really negative when I thought I was like being funny or just saying something. One thing that really helped me with behavioral changes is creating like mantras or affirmations in my head that are small, simple, and easy to repeat. This is kind of stupid, but I saw this post on Instagram that was like, be the person you want to fall in love with, and that has stayed in my mind rent-free for years. If I am a negative, sarcastic person, I will attract negative and sarcastic people, and that is not what I wanted. So a lot of the times before I opened my mouth to speak, I would just kind of take a moment, I'd repeat, be the person you want to fall in love with, and then I'd make the executive decision if I wanted to continue making a comment or not. Another phrase that I would constantly repeat in my head is, I'm creating the life of my dreams. That really worked for me, and I feel like it could work for a lot of people because it's so subjective. You are an adult. You can create whatever kind of life you want, and you have all the freedom in the world to do so. So whatever life you want to live, you have to start working towards it now. If you want to live a life that's really positive and filled with positive people, you have to be positive yourself. So I'd repeat that phrase and I would be like, I am creating the life of my dreams. And then I thought about my life, the life I wanted, and like, how does my behavior hinder me getting to that life? I just repeat that phrase a lot because it can pertain to so many different behavioral changes and habits that you want to make. A lot of the times those mantras and phrases would just make me take a step back. It would make me really understand the situation, what was going on, what I wanted the outcome to be, and how I wanted to be perceived and what I wanted to do. When you take that moment, it really helps, and you can redirect yourself if you are going into a direction that you don't want. And like I said, it took me about 2 or 3 years to even start attempting to change my thinking. It's not a process that's gonna happen in a month or so. It's a process that's lifelong. And even the habits I have now, both physical and cognitive, they're going to change. Maybe they're gonna be better, or maybe I'm gonna take them out of my life completely. I mean, we all have an idea in our heads of who we want to be in our adult life, what we want from the world, what we want to give to the world, and how we want people to perceive and behave around us. But those ideas are always so incredibly amorphous, and they're always changing, and change is never a bad thing. You just really have to take a step back and you have to decide what you want and what you want to do and how you're going to do it. I just think that for any habit that you want to make or try to do, you have to have a game plan. Even if the habit is something really small like brushing your teeth, you have to have like a 5-minute window in your day to be able to do it. You have to wake up in the morning, you have to be like, I am going to brush my teeth twice today. It is going to be at 12 p.m. and it's going to be at 8 p.m. Having a lot of digital reminders is super helpful for me. Like I put it on my calendar, I have reminders, I have alarms for it. And like I said, eventually it becomes just so natural that you just do it. Even for like cognitive behavioral changes, you have to have a game plan. Like when I was trying to become more positive, every single time I had a negative thought, I immediately countered it. Like I remember one time there's this really bad cross-country practice I did. I think that day we were doing a really hard workout, which was like 5 miles of sprints, and then it was raining and I was just not having a good day. I was really negative. I was like on the verge of tears because I just did not want to be at cross-country practice so bad. And then I kind of took a moment to myself, and then I kind of realized like, hey, I'm really negative right now. I'm giving off a lot of negative energy. People do not want to be around me because I'm scowling and I'm very, very grumpy and upset. So I kind of took a moment to myself. I kind of realized, hey, it's cross-country practice. It's a bad day. It's not a bad life. Like, I can just grow up and do practice, and the next day it'll probably be better. And once I had hit that moment of self-awareness where I'm like, hey, I'm being really negative, I forced myself to not have negative thoughts. I kind of forced myself to find positives in that day, and I'm like, listen, I'm with my friends, I'm exercising, I'm training for my next race so I can do well. It's a bad day, it's not a bad life. By the end of the day, I realized that it had worked and that I had switched my thinking around and I was not as miserable. And I had successfully changed something that I didn't like about myself, which was my mindset. It can just be so hard to build a habit and to stick with it. One thing I will always say, and one thing I do want to remind people, is that progress is not linear. If you fall back into something bad, it is not permanent and it is not forever. You are going to fall back. There are some days, if you're trying to go for a walk in the morning, that you do not want to go for a walk in the morning, and you do not have to. But that also means then the next day, you kind of got to pick yourself up and you got to go for that walk. If it's a much harder habit to break, like let's say drinking, yeah, people are going to relapse. It's a fact of life. But it's also a fact of life that the world is going to keep turning with or without you. If you fall back, the world is not going to stop and wait for you to pick yourself back up. You kind of have to keep going the next day. So it is totally okay to fall back into bad things and to continue bad patterns, but you have to make that cognitive decision to change it the next time that you can. And you know, like New Year's resolutions where you're like, I'm going to start eating healthier, it's a new me, new year, all of this kind of stuff. And you watch people as their plans fall apart. They go to the gym for like a month and then it falls apart. A lot of people just give up after that. If you miss a couple days doing this new habit, that does not mean you have to stop and start all over. It just means you have to do it again the next time that you can. It's just being an adult, forming habits, managing so many different things in your young life. It can be so stressful, it can be just really hard, and it can be super draining. The most important thing to remember is that you are capable of doing it, you are capable of change, of progressing, and that you can't give up. There are some positive habits that I did in high school that I kind of stopped doing when I got to university that I want to implement again. That doesn't mean that I failed the habit, that I'm a failure, that I can't do anything right. It just means that I have to pick up where I left off. And I feel like that's what everyone has to do. You just have to pick up where you left off, and you have to continue moving forward, and you just have to continue bettering yourself. At the end of the day, you just have to remind yourself that it's possible and that if you put in the work, it can happen. I'm Renya, and you're listening to WC Wellness.